Thanks everyone for joining us, Flatirons Food Film Festival. It's going great so far. I've watched most of these films and I always learn something. I love that, from a science perspective, there's always more things we could always learn about this kind of stuff. Today, we're having a discussion about food waste. Keep in mind, Food Fighter is coming up soon. My name is Jonathan, by the way. Happy to be part of the FFFF. I like shortening that. When I type it out on my phone sometimes, it's much quicker. Go with the 4 F's there. And I'm gonna help introduce our panel and talk about the Q&A about food waste. In the Denver metro area, there's an awareness of how we need to minimize food waste with several organizations dedicated to combating it. In this program, some of these nonprofits that are working on the ground level will talk about what they're doing and answer questions in individual presentations. So I'll jump in between each one, but feel free to jump in with questions. You're a part of this interactive discussion as well. So thanks again for joining us. And a recording of this program will be available later on. So if you didn't catch the whole thing, if you jumped in a little bit later, no worries. Flatirons Food Film Festival YouTube channel will have everything instead of the normal event live for this one. And once again, Food Fighter and the post-film discussion will come after all of this. So definitely make sure you're signed up for that and get ready to watch that one. It's going to be awesome. There'll be another discussion after that as well. I can't wait for that one. International group of speakers examine the efforts of Australian food fighter and force of nature Ronnie Khan. I love it. And in Japan, Honolulu, Boulder, and through the environmental working group, amazing stuff can be happening in regards to food waste. So I encourage you to watch this film and join the discussion after everything as well. So let's kick it off right now. I've got David Laskarzewski. Said it right, right?
Yeah, man, great.
UpRoot Colorado. Take it away, David.
All right, good morning, everybody. My internet is a little bit spotty right now, so hopefully that doesn't become a habit. So good Sunday morning to you. Thank you to Julia, Eve, Jonathan, to everybody on the panel. I'm grateful to be here. So I just want to jump right in. I'm going to do a little bit of a screen share here, and then if there's time for Q&A in my 10 minutes, that's the plan. So real quickly, let's hope this works. Okay, so I might just keep it at this. Can everybody see that okay? Instead of going full screen, and I think that might be less heavy on the computer. So we'll give it a shot. Let's see what happens. Okay, so sorry, did I just lose the screen? Already not off to a great start. All right, here we go. So UpRoot mission is to measurably reduce surplus protective foods in Colorado, support the economic stability of farmers, and increase the nutritional security of our state's residents. So protective foods, they are fruits, vegetables, legumes. We don't glean too many legumes, and whole grains that have the power to nourish a growing population in a sustainable way. So what is the opposite of foods that are kind of created without a lot of agriculture behind them? UpRoot was founded in 2016 on the tailwinds of Feeding the 5,000 Front Range, which Susan and Hayden had certainly some direction and help to get that underway. We were incorporated in May of 2017. We were intentionally fiscally sponsored for 3 years. In the state of Colorado, I think we have per capita more nonprofits than any other state in the nation. So we wanted to be intentional in asking, does Colorado need another nonprofit? And so we fine-tuned our mission along the way, and we decided to apply for nonprofit status, which we received in February of 2020. So roughly 20 billion pounds of food remains unharvested on US farms annually. That's by ReFed, the organization ReFed with that stat. And then nearly 40% of Coloradans lack reliable access to nutritious food. And that's a recent study from Hunger Free Colorado. UpRoot works right now along the Roaring Fork Valley, parts of the Roaring Fork Valley in Garfield County, and along the Northern Front Range, the Metro Denver and into Well County. And we're hoping to get to Larimer County this year. So this year we were able to, with some extra funding, we hired a third gleaning coordinator, and we report in pounds and servings. We try to break it down into servings because not all calories are created equally. So spinach, for instance, may be more nutrient dense than another vegetable. And so this year, 2020, we saw 84% of our total from our first 3 years in operation. So we were stoked about the idea of a few more helping hands can make a difference. And sorry, folks. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on vernacular briefly, especially because we're going to be watching films that talk about food waste over the coming couple of days. Food waste is what we consider in households and businesses. Food loss takes place in transportation and storage. Surplus is what we deal with, which is what is left over on farms and in backyards, fruit trees and whatnot. So the reason we categorize it as such is, especially from a farmer standpoint, we've learned is they shouldn't be burdened with the emotional kind of baggage that comes with food waste. It's really not their fault, although farmers may plant extra. There are also a number of headwinds that farmers face: labor shortages, different market limitations, certainly restaurants now with 2020 and COVID-19. So surplus is more of an opportunity. What could you do with the surplus? Can we sell it? Can we divert it to hunger relief? And then food wisdom is something that UpRoot works to create or recreate, which is an appreciation for your food, a life-sustaining resource, and for those who work hard to produce it. A few of our initiatives, our gleaning initiative, which is volunteerism, which we get people to go to farms to harvest surplus and then divert it to hunger relief. We are a part of the Safe and Abundant Nutrition Alliance, SANA, on the Western Slope. We are in collaboration with Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, the Good Food Collective in Durango. For the past 3 years, we've been piloting a farm and food mobile workforce to bring supplemental on-demand labor to farmers so they can get more out of the field. We are currently fiscally sponsoring the Roaring Fork Alliance Home Food Garden Project. And then in the past, we've worked to help organize farm to food pantry partnerships and legislative advocacy. So I did have a slide about our team, and it seems like I can't find that at the moment. So I'm going to open anything up to Q&As because I don't want to take too much time with a presentation. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask them.
I hope it's okay if I ask a question, David.
I think it is.
Okay, well, I'm curious. I'm learning about your program for the first time, and it sounds wonderful. And with the products that you glean from farms, where do you end up sending those? Do those go to nonprofits, or do you try to sell them on the market, or what kind of channels do they go to?
We don't sell them. If farmers have surplus, it's a donation on their part. So our volunteer gleaning corps, we are insured. We train them. We give them when folks come out to the farm. We kind of tell them why the reasons that there exists surplus. So, and then we encourage volunteers to take a bag home with them. We rely on the infrastructure that's in place. So the nearest hunger relief agency is with whom we partner, and to try to divert this food and get it onto the tables of those folks in need or without food equity or in food insecurity as quickly as possible. So we definitely love to collaborate, and community food share has been a big partner where they have the infrastructure with trucks, refrigerated trucks. If we've got 4,000 pounds of cabbage that need to be refrigerated, asking volunteers to transport that in their cars is not feasible. And so partnering with organizations with logistical infrastructure, such as refrigerated trucks, and the volunteers on their end to unpack it and put it out for folks is what we work to do. So basically the nearest hunger relief agency to the gleaned is the folks that we call.
Hey Dave, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Great. I was curious because I know food takes a lot of nutrients out of the soil just to grow whatever end vegetables or whatever it is there any environmental impacts to pulling all of that food out and like not replenishing any sort of the nutrients that goes back into the soil? Are there any concerns about that?
Not really, because if you think about the biomass of a plant, it's more than just the leaves that are going to, or the fruit or the vegetable part of it that is going to hunger relief. So if you're harvesting, let's say, eggplant, so you're pulling the actual fruits, quote unquote, off of the plant, but those plants and the root systems get reconstituted into the soil at when that plant or that crop has produced, and it's time to kind of dig it back into the soil. So there's a lot of biomass. In fact, in many cases, most of the vegetable or fruit plant, the biomass is far greater than the actual fruit or vegetable. And if you're talking about vegetables, that biomass is reconstituted into the soil at season's end. So it's being nourished. And farmers who are looking to build soil are working on that year round. So when the season's ended for food production, they're planting cover crops, nitrogen fixations, peas, whatever they choose to use as a cover crop, to when the growing season begins again, that's reconstituted back into the soil. So soil building process is really a year-round endeavor. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Dave. This is Sandra in Boulder. And I want to know how someone like me can get involved. I don't have a refrigerated truck, and I'm 64 and I can't really carry much, but I really am passionate about this issue and I want to get involved.
Okay, so it looks like our time is up. You're welcome to, I think I'll send my email here in the chat. You can reach out to me if you want to come to a glean. So there are a number of ways, as other organizations on this call will let you know, to get involved from a volunteer standpoint, but there's more than a few ways to volunteer in the food systems work. But you're certainly welcome to come out to a farm. Just get in touch with me. There's my email. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. Appreciate it. UpRoot Colorado. Appreciate everyone jumping in. A lot of great questions so far. I think we'll have more as this goes on. Don't forget Food Fighter coming up at 1 p.m. today. So make sure you're signed up to not only watch that, participate in the discussion afterwards. I'd like to now welcome Mary Rochelle of the Boulder Valley School District Food Project to the panel.
Hi, I'm Mary Rochelle. I'm the Program and Grants Coordinator for the Boulder Valley School District. We call ourselves the School Food Project, but we're just really the food services department of the school district. So in a normal year, we serve 14,000 meals a day to our kiddos. We usually try to make those as healthful and good for the environment as well as our kiddos as possible. So we do a lot of local sourcing, mostly scratch cooking. It's really important to us to put really high quality meals on our children's plates in this community. So that's big picture what we do. But we're also really passionate about food waste and sustainability overall, since food is such a huge contributor to climate change. And I just want to share that I think a lot of times, as individual consumers, we think about food waste as a personal responsibility and personal choice driven sort of situation, where if I buy kale at the grocery store and I bring it home and don't use it and have to throw it away, that's food waste. And that's true. But I think looking at food waste in a really big systemic way, it's important to remember that there's this really crazy fact that if food waste were a country, that it would be the number 3 emitter of global greenhouse gases. So below, I think, the US and China, food waste would be its own country as far as how much greenhouse gases are emitted from it. So it's a huge problem. And I think it's really exciting to think about institutions' role in food waste. So we are a school district. We have a $4 million food budget that we spend every single year on food. And so the choices that we make, and if we're able to shift some of our food out of the stream that would go to waste, then we're able to make a pretty large impact. So I think it's really exciting to think about the role that school districts and prisons and hospitals and other institutions can have when it comes to food waste. So I kind of wanted to start with that. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about food waste along our own supply chain in the school district and what that looks like. So starting from the procurement standpoint, when we're buying from our vendors, we buy a lot of produce. We have really beautiful salad bars when it's not COVID. Right now, we aren't able to do salad bars, but we still do a lot of fruits and veggies. We like to buy from a lot of local farmers as much as possible. And it's cool hearing what David had to share about the produce that doesn't get harvested in the field. And we think about that too, because we're able to buy some seconds from farmers, which is oftentimes like the produce that doesn't look good enough to go to the farmer's market and sell well. We're able to provide a really great place for that produce to come to. So for example, this last fall, Olin Farms had these like massive radishes that were the size of like grapefruits. And if you saw those at the farmer's market, you might be like, holy cow, like, I don't know what to do with that. But we were able to take those radishes and we can shred them or slice them or chop them and serve them to our students. And they're gonna love that. So that's one way that we hope that we can help divert food waste, is by providing a market for some of those produce products that farmers might not be able to sell directly to consumers. Thinking about the production standpoint in our kitchen. So we do a lot of scratch cooking. We are there chopping up our broccoli heads. We are chopping up a lot of vegetables. We, chop our potatoes to make French fries. We don't buy a lot of it frozen. And so we're able to think about the parts of the vegetable that would normally get thrown away. So for example, we have a really popular dish on our menu called broccoli stuffed potatoes. And so we have broccoli crowns that get stuffed with like cheese and put into a baked potato. And so what we were realizing was that the stem of the broccoli often doesn't get used because it's not the tastiest part of the broccoli sometimes. And so we were able to think about, okay, what can we do with the stem of the broccoli? A lot of it's going to waste while we're chopping it up and using it to make this meal. And so thinking creatively about, can we shred this and put it into a coleslaw? Can we shred this and mix it with some other tasty vegetables to make it appealing on the salad bar? By doing a lot of scratch cooking, we're able to be thoughtful about using the whole product rather than having some of it go into the compost. On that note, we also have this really cool system in our production kitchen. Right now it's down. It's kind of always like a tech troubleshooting, but we usually use it to weigh the compost that we are producing as part of our scratch cooking process. So we have a scale and a monitor, and we're able to see like, okay, we threw away 200 pounds of broccoli stems today. And we're able to track that data over time and see what the trends are and where we're producing a lot of waste. And that's able to help us to analyze where we can make improvements as far as not wasting as much food and sending it to the compost bin. So that's kind of on the cooking side. And then thinking about our food and when it gets to a child's tray, we also have the Lean Path machines installed in some of our cafeterias. And we've had the support of Boulder County Zero Waste grant programs to help get some of those machines in there. And we have a really large screen where students can take their trays at the end of lunch and they'll dump the food that can go into the compost in the compost, and they'll in real time weigh it and tell the student, here's overall how much your school has sent to the compost. It has some really cool facts about what it means for the environment. So letting kids know on the front of house end, how they're contributing to food waste is also important too. In addition to that, we have a lot of signage. So we really encourage students to just take what they're going to eat from the salad bar. We think it's really important to not just put a ton of food on their trays, but to let them decide what they want to eat and how much, and let them know that they can always come back for seconds. We've also set up a system where students, if they take an apple or an orange or some other whole produce, they can put it back into a bin at the end of their lunch period, and we will rinse it and other students can come and get it, so that there's extra food in the cafeteria for students, and our students know that they don't have to throw away a perfectly good apple or orange that normally might get put right into the compost if they're done with their lunch. So that's kind of what food waste looks like in the school district. We are grateful to partners like Boulder County Zero Waste and also EcoCycle. They help a lot with signage around compost and cafeterias and educating students about the importance of food waste. And I also just want to, if we have time for questions, I just want to briefly touch on the role of youth engagement in these types of issues. I think it's really important to bring youth voices to the table. We in 2019 received a grant to do a extensive food waste audit program in a lot of our schools, about 10 of our schools. And so those were really student-led and student-driven food waste audits, where they stood in the cafeteria and, you know, talked to their peers about which bin their lunch should go into, whether it's the trash, the compost. And then those students were very involved in weighing that waste and talking about how much waste there was overall and ways that they can encourage their peers to waste less food. And I think that's just a really important thing to carry going forward, is how do we engage, you know, the next generation in this work, and how do we get their ideas into this work to make sure that we're partnering with them, since they're inheriting a lot of the problems that come with food waste. So I think that's it. I think what you can do, just ending on that note, Sandra, you had a good question. I think thinking about the institutions that you engage with, or institutions that are funded through our taxes, and thinking about how you can ask them questions about what they're doing around food waste, I think is really important. I think there's a lot of power with institutions to make improvements. And so I'd encourage, anyone listening to this to be active in engaging with institutions that you are a part of. So I don't know if there's time for questions.
If anyone has any, feel free. We got a minute or two. Okay, Mary, thanks so much. It's very informative. I wish I was still in school to actually have some of those amazing meals. We did not have that when I was in school at all. Boulder Valley School District Food Project, thank you. Once again, just making sure everyone is aware, 1 p.m. today, Food Fighter, and there's still 5 more days after today of the festival. So sign up, a lot of cool films and discussions you can be a part of afterwards. Follow on social media, Flatirons Food Film Festival. Next, I'd like to welcome Susan Reynaud of the City of Denver Food Waste Pilot Program of Certifiably Green Denver. Did it all with one breath. So thanks, Susan. Feel free to take it away.
Great, thanks so much. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here today. I'm going to attempt to share my screen as well, so bear with me for just a sec. Let's see. There we go. All right, great. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here with you all today. This is such a great and pertinent topic right now. So I'm going to share with you a little bit of information over the last, actually not so much in 2020, but in 2019, in the very beginning of 2020, the City of Denver worked really closely with the National Resources Defense Council. We actually were the recipient of a grant. We were one of 2 cities in the country to get a grant to really look at food waste and just to see kind of what we could do and how we could move the needle. And so as part of that assessment, or part of that work, NRDC helped us do an assessment to really see like where our food waste was generated by sector. And we were able from that to see that the largest was residential at 41%. And then after that was actually restaurants and caterers. It's different depending on, the different cities. But in Denver, we found this really interesting. And given the fact that we have a business sustainability program that already works with a lot of different restaurants, we decided that that was one area that we were going to try to tackle. And so I work with that program. And so we decided through that we would gather some different community partners, both internal to the city and external, to see what we could do to really see how we could move the needle on food waste. So these are some of the partners that we worked with. We ended up doing 3 separate pilots by neighborhood. And within each neighborhood, we tried to get 10 participating restaurants to see if they could help us, and kind of as we developed this methodology to try to assess that. And so the first one we worked with the Highland neighborhood. That one's kind of in the top upper left. Then we worked on South Pearl Street down by University. And then the last one was actually with a food hall. It was kind of an interesting thing because everybody was under one roof. And that was in the Capitol Hill area. So over that time, we worked with 30 different restaurants. So this is our kind of restaurant list. And in doing this, we really based our model off of ReFed's food recovery, our food pyramid. And it's kind of a simplified version of EPA's, if you've ever seen that one. And so the first thing that's most important is really looking at how we can prevent food waste in the first place. After that is just trying to figure out what we can recover and really use that to feed other people. And then last but not least is the composting piece, which is kind of the easiest, but we had to really try to like think critically about how we could kind of flip this and see what we could do kind of in the on the front end. So for prevention, we worked with the NRDC. They had already done some work in Nashville, working with the James Beard Foundation. And they had come up with a list of different actions that restaurants could do to help kind of prevent food waste in the first place. And so in working with the restaurants, we set up the pilot. So we recruited the 10 restaurants in each neighborhood. We had a kickoff meeting with all of those restaurants and kind of presented to them. We had welcome packets with kind of all of this information in there. And then we met with them all individually as well and really kind of helped them kind of through this process. And the prevention piece was really interesting. It was the hardest one really to crack, and every one of them had a very different take. I think from the beginning, they weren't really sure how this prevention piece was going to work. And it actually took them composting. I should back up a little bit. None of the restaurants in the first 2 pilots had composted before. And so through composting, which I'll get to in a minute, they were able to kind of back into some of these prevention strategies once they saw what they were actually throwing out. Next was the donation piece. So we partnered with We Don't Waste, a nonprofit here in Denver, and they agreed to stop by the restaurants on call Monday, Wednesday, Friday to pick up any donatable food from those restaurants. They normally work on a much larger scale, but they recognized just the importance of kind of trying to capture this sector. And so they agreed to work with us on this. And then the last piece was compost. And so there were 2 compost haulers at the time in Denver. And so we actually worked with both of them and brought them both to the table, divvied up the restaurants among them. And so we set each restaurant up for 2 months with free compost service. And we also provided them with all of like the bins, the liners, training, everything that they would need to be able to be successful in that. And you see straws here, but those are compostable straws. It always throws everybody off seeing straws in the compost. So this is what we provided the restaurants with. They got their kind of packet of information on the left that just kind of gave them everything as a summary of what was expected of them. We gave them a kitchen poster to put up so that all of the staff were on the same page and really kind of like knew what the objectives were. And then we gave them the bins that they needed and the bag liners. And then this was the fun part. We did waste audits at the beginning and at the end for every restaurant. And so we dug through all of their waste to see what they were generating, and then at the end, what we were able to divert. And these are some examples. It's pretty wild of what we found in the beginning from some of these restaurants. There's some really beautiful food in there that we were able to kind of help in the end. They were able to come up with strategies to save a lot of this. And then we provided them with a report on the left from the waste audits. And some of the key takeaways were pretty interesting. On the prevention, as I mentioned, a lot of them had to kind of start composting first before they started seeing, like what they were actually wasting. The prevention piece was pretty fun, seeing what people came up with. It was really tailored to the restaurants. One of them was a coffee shop, and they had leftover like oats and cheese and some kind of random things. And they ended up making them into dog treats that they gave out to their patrons, and their patrons and the dogs loved them. Other ones changed the way that they were ordering. And so they started ordering more frequently and in smaller batches. They also started running more specials. And within a month, they were saving, and they still are saving, about $400 a month. So it has some big economic implications as well. And then another one was they made risotto, and they actually took all of their leftover veggies and made their own stock. So they were actually able to save some money doing that and to use that in their risotto instead of having to buy their stock. So it was fun. Everybody was different. Everyone came up with something different. On the donation side, few restaurants were able to donate food through the program, it was a challenge for sure. A lot of what what they had was they just either didn't have enough, or they weren't able to donate. We had a few donations that were successful, but it was tricky. The compost part was really great. That was kind of the hook that got most of the restaurants involved. We're unlike Boulder. We're envious of you guys with your, with kind of the compost mandate that you guys have up there, but we don't have anything like that here. And so we really kind of use that as a way to get restaurants involved in this. And a lot of the restaurants ended up composting and keeping that on after the fact because they could see the value in it. Even though it is a little bit more expensive. And then the behavior change, everybody liked it and they found that it was great for the staff morale. Like staff really got engaged in it and got excited about it. The customers liked it as well. And so for community engagement, we did a few different things just to give them the credit, that the restaurants deserved for doing this. We really wanted to close the loop on compost and really kind of show, that full circle. So we purchased a bunch of compost from A1 Organics and put it on a park in the neighborhood, in the Highlands neighborhood. So they applied it to the grass there. And then a few months later, we had a film screening for the community on food waste with the film Just Eat It. So that was really fun. We also had Broadway Market, which was the food hall. Since we couldn't do something like this, we actually had a tasting event. And so we had all of the different restaurants come up with a dish that was made from items that would normally be food waste, things like broccoli stems, like Mary mentioned. And so they each provided 50 dishes that we paid for. And then we had partnered with Slow Food Nations. And so we held a community event around that. And it was really fun just to kind of see what everybody came up with. We also have a sustainable neighborhoods program. And so members from that went around and did some fun kind of flash mobs at the participating restaurants just to kind of thank them for the work that they were doing. This is from that tasting event. So these are the different foods or the different dishes that people came up with. We were also able to do a short kind of promo video for NRDC. And then we had marketing materials. So we had food, we made decals for the windows for the restaurants that were participating. We also created little table tents for the restaurants so that people, while they were waiting for their food, could see that they were participating and kind of get better educated on that, since the residential sector was a key driver in this. We also had some little takeaway cards on how residents in Denver can can get compost service as well, because also we don't have pay as you throw here. And so, so people have to sign up individually for that. So that's kind of the information. Really quickly, just a couple of follow-ups. That ended in February of 2020. Moving forward through that grant, we were able to hire somebody who is a food waste administrator for the city. And happily, we've been able to keep her on. So we're hoping that we're going to be able to really kind of keep pushing forward on this front. And then one of my favorite projects is actually in conjunction with Boulder and Boulder County. And we're working with an organization called Zero Foodprint. And they actually won the James Beard Humanitarian of the Year Award last year. And it's again, kind of trying to close that loop. And so it's kind of a table to farm model where people can, their participating restaurants add a 1% surcharge to their bill. It's opt out. So if people don't want to pay it, they don't have to. But that money actually goes to fund regenerative farming practices on local farms in Boulder County. And then there'll be some in Denver as well. So it's a really fun project. It's just getting off, kind of launching right now. And there's some restaurants that are involved in Boulder. There's some in Denver. We're just kind of trying to start recruiting more and launch this. So anyways, thanks for your time. I probably ran over. I'm sorry if I did. Feel free to ask questions now or later.
Susan, that was great. I love all the statistics you have in there, and then the little reminders to help people change their behavior. That's really the key with all this, is changing the mindset. So thanks so much. Awesome presentation there. We'll have time at the end for a few more questions as well. Don't forget, lots of more videos throughout the rest of the week and films to not only watch, but take part in afterwards. So make sure to check it out. Flatirons Food Film Festival. Thanks for joining us. And if you're watching on YouTube afterwards, well, you found us after the fact. Keep following for more info. Next, I'd love to welcome Hayden Dansky, Boulder Food Rescue. Hayden, feel free to take it away.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for y'all for your presentation so far. I will also share my screen really quick. I just put together a very brief presentation. Hopefully you all can see. Cool, I got a head nod. So Boulder Food Rescue, like our mission is to create a more just and less wasteful food system. We are kind of a classic food rescue that takes food directly from grocery stores primarily, takes it directly to about 40 different recipient sites across Boulder. We're unique in a few ways. We focus primarily on produce. That is like kind of our niche food that we're distributing, uncut fruits and vegetables, because it is desired more by the communities that we serve to have healthier foods. We take it we're totally decentralized, so we take that food directly to communities. And I think where we're really unique is how we do our programming on the community side. We set up what we call no-cost grocery programs, where we operate in the backyards and community centers of affordable housing complexes, places where people are already gathered. And that's kind of like a way to bypass barriers to accessing food. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I did want to like kind of focus a little bit on the food waste side of things for today, but here's a few kind of stats on where we're at as an organization. You know, we have about 150 active volunteers at any given time. And we're moving about 1,300 pounds of food every day. We operate every day of the week with 364 days a year. The only day we don't operate is Christmas because the stores are actually closed. Otherwise, we're able to get this food directly to people every other day of the year. And so far, we've moved about 3.3 million pounds. And I guess the other kind of unique thing about BFR in true Boulder style is that we distribute as much food as possible by bicycle. And that came about in part because when we co-founded this organization, back in 2011 now, we were all like bike advocates. We were like, if we're gonna go pick up food from the stores and take it literally just blocks away, let's use bikes. Let's do this more sustainably. We found there were some other sweet little benefits of this. We have 150 volunteers who love biking food. We have a visibility that's different, but mostly, yeah, we don't have to use more carbon and greenhouse gases in order to move food around because we are decentralized. Each shift is about 100 to 300 pounds of food, and it's fun. In 2016, we conducted a food waste audit. So it's been a few years now. And this is actually prior to what Susan was just talking about. One of our co-founders, Caleb Phillips, was working with the NRDC on that project that Susan just described. Prior to that, we did a local level food waste audit to try to look at how much food is going to waste. Similarly, we looked at a lot of the data from the haulers and did a lot of qualitative analysis. What we didn't do is actually get to dig through the trash, which was always my dream. So it was exciting to see that part of the presentation and kind of what that unearthed. But what we did find that I pulled out a few things. These are just screenshots of the audit. And if you're ever interested in looking at it, you can download it on our website. It's available. But we found that there was definitely more that we could do more to educate people who were working at different grocers and restaurants. There was some misinformation about liability concerns, misinformation about, how to donate, things like that. But also one thing that's super interesting to me is that there's discrepancies between perceptions of food waste between management and folks who are actually doing the throwing of away, the non-management employees. So, people who are doing the throwing away of the food would qualitatively say yes, we have a lot of food waste. Whereas a lot of management staff didn't have that same perception. And so that was really important for us to be of course, that makes sense, but to really see it in the data and see there's a lot more we can do, especially for the folks who aren't seeing it every day, to kind of show why this is such a big issue. And so that's one thing that we did from that point on is we spent a lot more time as an organization working with staff at the grocery stores to kind of raise awareness of the issue and try to do what institutionalize food donation practices. And since we primarily work with grocery stores, it was a lot of like trying to make sure that their systems that they put in place stay, even when there's a lot of staff turnover, which at grocery stores, well, and restaurants, there's a lot of staff turnover. And so that was really important for us to try to institutionalize. We found that there was a big role for food recovery in this space. However, even in a place like Boulder, where there's a lot happening for the size of our city, between the food bank, the food pantries, and Boulder Food Rescue, we're still only diverting about 3% of the municipal solid waste that we're seeing. And so in terms of like trying to institutionalize those food donation practices, we also are partnering with the other organizations who are distributing food out from those grocery stores to make sure that the employees know who to donate food to, when we're coming, all of that too, so that we can better partner to make sure that we can get that food out. And we ran a few different scenarios around like, what would it look like if we just did a little bit more in terms of food waste reduction? How much greenhouse gas reduction would that lead to? How much more organic waste diverted would that lead to? And so again, what's something that is different in terms of the other study is that not all of this waste is actually like surplus good food. And so that was something that we have to also be aware of, is that some is actually bad. But another thing that we found over time because of our work, oh shoot, I'll skip ahead, with our programs is that we know that we did a lot more after we got feedback from a lot of the people who were receiving the food on the end to make sure that we were sorting really well at the grocers, to make sure that the food that we were diverting was actually good. So to talk a little bit about the kind of, I guess, recipient side of things briefly, and then I haven't looked at my notes once, so I want to go back to a couple things, but to talk a little bit about this real quick is that where we're really unique in terms of how we distribute food is that and this has changed a little bit since COVID, but we did always take food to the pantries, to the shelters, to the meals, people who are distributing food out. But one place that we're unique is that we go directly to where people already are, affordable housing sites, preschools, daycares, and we establish what we call no-cost grocery programs. And what this does is cut down on barriers to accessing charitable food, which I'll kind of see if I can go back. Some of the barriers, and we've done a lot of research in this field in terms of like food access work, which is like my little niche of the food system brain. But there's a lot of barriers to accessing charitable food services, even though charitable food is absolutely life-saving. There's a lot that comes with it. And so something that we always say is for folks who are accessing these services, just because the food is at no cost doesn't necessarily mean it's free. It takes a lot of emotional toll. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy to be able to access just the foods that you need to survive. And so I won't go through all of these, but our programs are really designed to address these barriers, to cut down on transportation, to have residents be fully autonomous over the programs that they run. They have the power and agency to distribute food how they want. They run their programs. They are the people in their communities who know their communities best. And so they're the ones really making the programs happen. And we kind of work to support them to exercise their own right to food. And what this does is gives people more power. It gives people more of a choice, and it gives people more of a voice, like to be able to give feedback, to have a say in how things get run. And because of that, I think that's helped us influence how we also operate on a food waste side of things, and making sure that the food that is coming to people respects the dignity of those people who receive that food. And it's not just all food that is surplus should go to people. And in the panel after the documentary, we're going to be talking a little bit about separating out some of the issues of food waste and some of the issues of hunger, because they're both very complex issues that might need there's different opinions about this, but maybe need different solutions to address them. And so, yeah, I guess I'm just going to actually look at my notes to see if there's anything else I wanted to say. If you want to know more about Boulder Food Rescue, you can totally look us up. You can get involved, you can volunteer, you can reach out. One other thing I think I wanted to say was to touch base on the post-COVID after, I should also check my time. After COVID hit and we saw all sorts of things happen in the food supply, grocery stores actually had less food to donate, maybe in part because people were buying up the stores, maybe in part because grocery store employees were like really busy and it wasn't a priority. We did start working with local farmers. We worked with David to get connected to people. And we actually received some funding to be able to pay farmers, which was really important for us too, since they were so impacted by the pandemic as well, to be able to buy some of that surplus food and get that to people. And so because of the pandemic, as tragic as it is, some of the cool collaborations that are happening and problem solving and reduction of barriers that are happening are super important, I think, for the food systems movements to kind of keep using as a foundation to move forward. And one last thing I think I'll touch base on is the compost ordinance is something that we also advocated for after the food waste audit came out. And it's really interesting to see, like I've seen definitely, and there are, as Susan said, all sorts of barriers to restaurants donating. And so I think it's really cool that it's in place, especially for restaurants that might not just have this like huge, like this photo, huge, quantities all the time. And sometimes with grocery stores, it's actually really tricky. We thought if people saw more food in like visible, that maybe they would want to donate it more instead of just throwing it into a compactor. And sometimes we wonder, and I don't have, this is totally anecdotal, I don't have any data or information on this, but sometimes I wonder if, because there's compost available, if it actually reduces the amount of desire to donate because there's this other solution instead. And so it's just a question I have and something for us to continue to explore. But it is really amazing to see just all the different levels of, from government to nonprofit to community members kind of getting involved. So I will stop there.
Good stuff, Hayden. I love the eye-opening stats, and I think you're right. Post-COVID, I think people are going to be more conscious about what is really going on. Is the one kind of positive with all this kind of stuff. And don't forget, 1 p.m. Food Fight, you're going to be on that panel as well, Hayden. So definitely tune in for that one. And then later this afternoon, we have Sacred Cow, all about regenerative agriculture. So it is a festival afternoon on sustainability. Thanks so much for joining us with everything. I'm going to turn it over to JoAnna Cintrón and talking about revision and what is going on there.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm actually really thrilled to go after Hayden because I think, we approach food waste in a very different way. Food waste is not, it is an environmental issue for us, but it really comes down to food access in our community and how food waste can actually help with the emergency food needs that we've seen during COVID. And so I think I need to back up a little bit, introduce you guys to our vision, introduce you to myself, give you a bit of a picture about Westwood, the community that we serve, and then go into that because it's a little complex and I come from a very different lens than most of the presenters. So Revision is an organization that works in the intersection of systems change and direct service. We have more than 250 individual home gardens across Southwest Denver and an urban farm producing anywhere between 75,000 and 100,000 pounds of food locally. So that's locally grown produce in a neighborhood that has very little access to fresh, healthy, and affordable food. With that, we are committed to creating an equitable food system and believe that you really can't have health equity without racial equity, which is something we've obviously really seen during this year in particular. And we really work in addressing the systems of racial equity, white supremacy that are contributing to food insecurity and food access. And so with that, I want to step back a little bit and give a bit of a personal history. I started with Revision in 2017, in August of 2017. My family are farmers in Puerto Rico. And in September of 2017, 1 month after I started my job, Hurricane Maria hit the island of Puerto Rico and destroyed our family's farm, along with a lot of other families' farms. And I'm sure you all remember seeing the coverage of people waiting in lines to go into grocery stores and access food. And during that time, I learned that the island imports 85% of its food. And I started really asking myself, why is that? My family were farmers since we can remember. The island is a beautiful place for agriculture. It has an agricultural history. Why was that happening? And that's when I really started looking at the system and understanding that this system of capitalism can't really exist if people's basic needs are actually taken care of. And so what are the implications of that? And oftentimes we're taught the sort of rugged individualism, and that if we're poor, we don't have access to food, it's because we're not working hard enough. And I think that that's where the problem lies with food access. So, you know, from my example, Puerto Rico to Westwood, our community, to Indigenous people who were here first, we worked the land before we were colonized. We became free labor. We built generational wealth for folks who are here, really contributes to the system of food access. And so you have a system where communities of color live in greater levels of poverty, they experience higher levels of food insecurity, and are oftentimes living in communities without access to food. And I want to step back a little bit and just say that, you know, those are not food deserts. It's not some natural phenomenon. It's very much by design. It's very much what we call food apartheid. And so with that revision, we take an asset-based approach to food insecurity and systems change. Westwood is a community that's in Southwest Denver. It's actually part of Denver, but on the west side. And it's 80% Latino, and our community is mostly Mexican, mostly recent immigrants that come from agricultural roots. And so our founders really made that connection, saying, okay, we're dealing with food insecurity, but we have the assets to really handle that. And so we hire women from the community as promotoras, which is a Latin American model, who it's really called promotoras de salud. So women who are really promoting healthy living, connections to healthy lifestyle, that sort of thing. And the women in our neighborhood are the natural organizers. They promote health for their families and others. And we have 8 promotoras, and because of that, we are able to have 250 gardens in individual homes in the community, along with offering hundreds of free cooking classes, everything from farm to table cooking to cooking with kids to canning and preserving. And then we also offer continuing education around SNAP, the pandemic EBT, WIC, and this year's census outreach. So going back to when COVID hit, and again to Hayden's point earlier, we were a trusted resource in the community. We were seen as the place for food access, to come, you know, if you need food, if you need community resources. And you know, we stepped back a little and thought how different it would have been had, you know, the grocery store shelves been empty, but our families would have had their gardens up and running, and it would have been in the height of garden season, and food would have been fairly plentiful. But at the time it wasn't. And so we immediately sprung into action and worked with our partners at Kaizen Food Rescue, who also work with Food Bank of the Rockies, and we're able to take 15 to 20,000 pounds of food a week and redistribute that into the community through the no-cost grocery programs. And you know, I want to step back a little bit too and say that, you know, this myth of food security is a myth. We have enough food in this world to feed everyone 1.5 times over. Food insecurity is very much by design, and it looks different. And we knew that within our community, when people lost jobs overnight, we knew what that meant for food. We knew, you know, food insecurity looks like you are grocery shopping the day you get your paycheck so that you can make that, you can feed your family and make that stretch until you get your next paycheck. But what happens when you don't get that next paycheck? And so we knew immediately, if there's one thing we could do is provide a place with no stigma, where you're getting food from friendly faces, where you're also getting culturally relevant food, which is a really important piece of it as well. There's food, you know, food waste is unfortunately plentiful. And sometimes that means that people think, you know, oh, well, it's just waste. You just take what you can get, and it doesn't matter its nutritional value. It doesn't matter its cultural relevance. But to us, it really does. Having dignity with that is also really important. And so we launched that program in April of 2020. It was supposed to be 8 weeks, and we are still continuing that program. To date, we've distributed about 800,000 pounds of food to community to feed them during this time, so that they don't have to choose between doing groceries and paying their rent. And that's 800,000 pounds of food that would have been wasted. And so we're really talking about food access and food security and how those two work together during this problem that is COVID, and also addressing the systems that are causing this, and hoping that when we see ourselves on the other side of all of this, the system is changing along with our community. So that's kind of a quick overview of us in Westwood and what we're doing at Revision. Happy to take any questions or chats.
Any questions for JoAnna or any other presenters right now? Great work, JoAnna. I think it's important to tell people about these realities. These are things that are actually going on in an era when some people are in the more selfish mode during the last 10 months. It's important to let people know that the other side is actually the more important side. There was a question that came here in the chat. Can you talk about the rich food traditions in Westwood?
Sure, yeah, and I glossed over that, but that's my favorite thing to talk about. So we actually are on a beautiful campus called Rise Westwood, which houses our urban farm, but also houses 3 local food businesses. Cultura Craft Chocolate is a female-owned craft chocolate, Mexican style bean to bar chocolate shop where she makes her own chocolate and also does very traditional Mexican beverages and foods. She grinds her own corn, does the whole nixtamal process, which is actually treating the corn so that it's good for human consumption. And then we've got Ixtiba Yucateco, which is a Yucatan-based mobile food concept. And then we have Catrucho Concepts, which is a Honduran-based and kind of immersive, more event-based food concept. But also, again, because our community is 80% Latino, we have so as many people in the community we have that many entrepreneurs who are working in food space. And so on Sundays we do Domingos de Tianguis, which is like a local what you'd see Latin American market. Ixtibai does a traditional barbacoa where they actually slaughter the sheep or lamb, I always forget which one, Saturday morning and bring it down to us and then bury it underground Saturday evenings, and then Sunday mornings we have the barbacoa. So I would definitely invite you all to come out to Westwood. It's a beautiful, beautiful community. Again, you know, I want to also say that communities, I always think that the communities who need the most have the most to give, and it is really a beautifully vibrant space, and I would love for you all to make the trek down to Westwood. Yeah, we've gotten a lot of press in Westward recently with our chefs, so you're welcome to look that up as well, and just a really delicious time. Come say hi, come eat with us.
Now I'm hungry. We're going to open it up for all the panelists to be available for any kind of Q&A, either in the chat. I can communicate some of that, or if anyone wants to chime in, feel free. You can unmute yourself and jump in.
Hi, this is Dave Laskarzewski. I just want to share again, I think what Susan and the city of Denver are doing with restaurants is really important, because at a one-to-one level, as you saw in Susan's issue, and literally throwing something organic into landfill is an environmental hazard, because down the road, it's going to create methane. So anything that's it looks like anything that is thrown into landfill that decomposes anaerobically is an issue. So
thanks, David. I realized that I forgot to share one stat that I think is helpful when I presented. To that effect, what we saw in our waste audits is that the restaurants that were not composting were diverting about 20% of their waste when we started. All of that was for like recycling, and all of the rest of their organics were going to the landfill. After they started composting, they were diverting 75% of their waste on average. So that it's a huge chunk. About 50% of their waste is organic. That was able to go to the land, or that was able to be composted instead of going to the landfill. And then from those audits, we actually saw upwards of 90% was actually divertible. So with a little bit more staff training, we would able to be diverting almost everything from the landfill. So it was really eye-opening. It was interesting, and we hope to be able to continue more in the future.
Awesome. Any other questions, or if anyone wants to add anything, feel free. Got about a minute or two.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, to Hayden's point, which I think definitely has merit. So how can we get food that is edible onto people's hands? So even from restaurants, I know restaurants are very gun shy. Federal law that protects individuals making donations, restaurants making donations. So I think that's definitely, we should look into having the discernment of this is compostable, but yes, it's actually edible. So let's take that route.
Yeah, a lot of re-education and just kind of changing people's behavior and how they view things. So awesome discussion. Thanks so much. Let's continue all of this. We've got 1 p.m. today. Food Fighter. Immediately afterwards will be a Q&A and panel discussion, so feel free to join in. We'd love to talk to you then. Thanks so much for stopping by Flatirons Food Film Festival. Follow on social media as well. Thank you to all the panelists. Appreciate it so much.